Welcome to the Premium Mindset, the weekly podcast where homegrown entrepreneurs and business owners, Evan Ritchey and Cameron Bawden, share the good, the bad, and the ugly of modern entrepreneurship and reveal what really happens behind the scenes of their personal and professional lives. As owners of two of America's fastest growing and most disruptive companies, Coconut Cleaning and Green Mango Pest Control, stay tuned for real stories, struggles, insight, and advice from real entrepreneurs in real time.
What's going on, everyone? I am excited to dive into today's podcast. The reason being is that it is something that we have worked very hard on, and that is following the management rule of 7, which is very quickly that no manager in Hype Farm, which is Green Mango, Agave, and Coconut, manages more than 7 people. And I look forward.
But we got smacked, man.
Yeah, we're getting roughed up from it.
And you found it. And that's what I want to talk about today, is that we pride ourselves on the 7, but it can get diced up really quickly when you have shared resources and you have one manager over multiple things, right?
Yeah. I think that's a question that we get a lot from people, which is like, how do I know when to hire? How do I think at the Jason Payne's event, that's when the guy asked, like, so is it literally at 7 then? Sometimes there's points where a team gets divided to 4 and 3, and there's just different reasons for all of it. But we have generally had I'd say a very good infrastructure by following this rule. And the reason we do it is it allows the individual employees to have faster response time, feel like they have a manager who isn't so busy that they have no time to build rapport with them, and they're able to be over their department and to be more in the details of that department. But right when those numbers start going to 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, I love when people like come and they brag. They're like, dude, I manage like 800 salespeople. And I'm like, you manage nothing then. You can't. But speaking to what you're saying is that a huge problem that we found out can happen as you add more people, as you scale, is the availability that certain managers have and are exposed to other departments and employees almost makes the rule of 7 obsolete.
So we had it set up. And this is what I really want to focus on, is that we had the rule of 7 set up, but their counterpart, meaning their manager next to them, so like a billing manager and a customer service manager, they would bypass you, who is over them, and just go straight to this person. And if you have 12 people, 12 managers total, and they're all going to this one person as opposed to just you, that's where we're seeing a ton of just mess of double work on your end. Because when you hear about it, it's like, hey, I already talked to this guy, but it's not working. So now we're going over here, and then people are taking on more responsibilities and getting burnt out and frustrated.
So shortening the learning curve for this entire episode and what you're going to hear, it could be summed up in infrastructures and policies and parameters are going to be one of the most important things you can implement as a business owner. And the reason I had been paying attention to it is I experience it myself. I feel like you say this a lot where you're like, man, even if I forgot to do this thing, the likelihood of a manager doing it and staying consistent with it is not going to happen. And so what I found out that was happening to me is that I'd be so proud about limiting or getting my list lower because we'd promote someone. And instead of me being over, 2 team leads, I'm now over just the managers over the team leads. I'm finding out that, okay, I have so many side counterpart people, or I would say the employees of the managers that I'm over, reaching out for different problems and solutions. And I feel like just to save my own time and energy, I turn them back to their manager. But not a lot of people are good at saying, hey, have you talked to your manager about this?
So how do you cut off that? Because you want managers to work together, but we're not talking about that. Like, that needs to happen. If the sales department has an issue with the routing, like, they should be able to meet and kind of figure that out before you. That's not what we're talking about. We're talking about going to a qualified sales manager and asking them maybe a routing question or asking them a customer service question. That's the problem, just because this is a qualified person, as opposed to just asking their zone of excellence or what they're hired for, which is, in this case scenario, a sales manager.
I feel like a clear-cut example that helps people understand and how you can avoid this, but also fix it is, let's say a executive manager or an owner is over, 5 or 6 managers, and then you have someone that does payroll. A consistent problem is these managers have commissions and productions that they get for performance, and they would go to payroll and say, hey, my pay is this, or my commission is this. And then payroll knows my policy is that I don't do anything with you, and I'm especially not increasing your paycheck without talking to a manager. Your manager is my manager, so like now I have to reach out to them.
Right.
When you could have just reached out to them and then they could reach out to me. So to your point, when that happens in high volumes, right? That's where the problems are. So there's no issue if counterpart manager goes to payroll and says, hey, how did you want payroll submitted to you? That's fine, because those are all equilateral things of like, this is how I do it. This is what you need to do. But where owners can run into issues, and where we run into issues, is when policies are being discussed to be changed, or operational infrastructure, or holidays and days off, and it's not with the right people in the room. They're kind of like, so, our customer service department would talk to our inside sales department, and they're like, hey, let's change initial customers to be serviced in, within 10 days.
Yeah.
And because we're busy right now. But if I were to know that, I would then go to the technician manager and say, hey, we need to hire more people because our policy is within 48 to 72 hours is initial customer service. And so having a clear-cut system of communication, and that's where I feel like, to answer your question, that's where I feel like any business owner or any leader in any organization can recommend, and saying, hey, look, this is my job and my responsibilities. I'm going to come to you for this, this, and this. And then for these topics that frequently come up in my job, who do you want me talking to? And having those things laid out.
That's what I thought was cool yesterday, is that you sat at all the managers in the room. You discussed, hey guys, we're proud of this rule of 7, but here's what I see is going on.
Yeah.
And a lot of that was highlighted because there's 2 of our 12 managers, key people have been with us for multiple years, that want to quit.
Yeah.
They're burnt out. And to me, it's only highlighted the importance. I was doing the math. It cost me around $300,000 a year in management pay to have this rule of 7. It's a lot of money, but I do that so that the manager doesn't get burnt out. But even though I have it, people are going and doing what we're talking about, which is why I wanted to talk about it on the podcast today, is that even if you have it set up, if this person's being bombarded just because they're a smart person or because they know a little bit about what you're asking them, even though it's not in their department, then they're going to feel that overwhelming feeling that I don't want them to feel, that burnout. And we're talking about people have been dealing with these challenges for probably north of 8 months. So they're at their breaking point of getting overwhelmed. And so not only they're doing their job, but they're doing someone else's job or asking those questions. And that's why you have the rule of 7. That's why it's so important, is that you don't want to burn out your manager. You just want them to focus on those 7 people.
Yeah. And here's what's cool about the rule of 7 is that when you implement it and follow it, people at the front line can almost look forward to getting a management position because they know this company isn't one to take advantage of the managers, where it's like some companies put people over.
We're not there right now.
Yes. But some people manage 10, 12, 13, 14, 15 people. But here, what's cool is that a tech can know, like, man, if we're growing, and I know these 11 field managers can only manage up to 7 techs, but if we're planning to take on 20 more techs in the next year, there's 3 more management positions that are going to be opened up.
Yeah.
And so there's almost a formula that companies can follow just by following the volume principle of 7, where if you say, look, I don't want a manager managing more than 7. So the second that department is heading to 8, you can split it to 4 and 4, 5 and 5, or 4 and 3.
Right.
However the mix up is, but it also creates a culture where people know that as we scale, that they're not going to lose touch with a manager just because they're doing too much.
Yeah. If you're a business owner out there, sitting back saying, how did this happen? A lot of people skip their manager or bypass that direct report because they don't have that trust in them.
Yeah.
And that's hard for me to hear because I'm paying a bonus to that. But also, if you skip that person and go to the next guy, Now all that work is, now that guy's over 14 people.
Yep.
Right. And that's the issue of burnout that happens. So it's highlighting those areas where your man, like that person over him, if he's being skipped, needs to improve, and you need to hold him accountable, which goes back to what we talk about so much, having key performance indicators with those people, having quarterly surveys, right? And knowing, hey, is this person bypassing? I'm really excited to hone back in on delegating. You brought up this very clearly yesterday. Hey, no one goes to these people. No one goes to there. The only person, let's take James, for example, James Sisko, our CFO, the only people that go to him for questions are you and I. No one else should be going to him.
Right.
Period. But everyone, there's 12 people going to him right now. And
Right.
that's the problem. And
12
maybe it's because they don't feel like, they could hear me or you,
Totally.
or maybe they feel like it's quicker, but that's the thing. If it's quicker, that's not a reason to go to them. You can't do that. You're going to burn him out.
Right. It creates a false sense of urgency, because a complaint we often hear is the immediacy of requests.
I love that you bring that up.
And when people, and I would say, Cameron, in the last 15 months of being over at Green Mango as well, there's probably been one or two things in the last 14, 15 months that legitimately in the moment.
I'm surprised there's one or two things.
And I'm even given a tiny bit, and that's the one or two that I really can't even think of right now, that my phone was blown up and it needed a response right there. And maybe it was about payroll, maybe, but that goes to show you that as owners and leadership, you need to help control the pace at which your business is being ran and set better expectations for how things are implemented, because most things that people want to address right now, they could be addressed at our next one-on-one.
And what I love, that's what I want to talk about. If you have the meetings scheduled, so you have a weekly one-on-one with our people, the longest they're going to go is 4 business days without talking to you. A company that's been in business for 6 years, 13 years, there's nothing so urgent that needs to go directly to you or has to be resolved today. And what I encourage them to do is, hey, if you see a problem, go do your research, have the data, come up with a solution. That's what we really want the managers to do, right? And then come meet with you in 3 days from now when you're one-on-one and say, hey, I found this 3 days ago. This is what I feel like is a major issue. It's big. Here's all the data. What do you want to do about it? And now that's a much better conversation than saying, hey, this is the problem. I think it is. I'm not certain. And I don't know what to do about it right now. Like, that doesn't do anything. I'm paying you to come with solutions here, not with problems.
Yeah. I had a few people call me the morning that, again, so much props to Roy, our West Valley branch manager. He's done so much for Green Mango, and I'm so happy that he's got some cool things ahead of him in a different field. But I was contacted by maybe 2 or 3 people in about 15 minutes saying, like, have you heard? Have you heard? Have you heard?
Yeah. It's like, everything's
it's like, I
good.
will.
Yeah.
I will. And I feel like a lot of, and where I go wrong a lot is when these managers are interacting, there is a difference between saying like what you said, but it's not to have your people feel like they can't make a decision until they interact with you. It's primarily just to say, look, hey, you had this customer call in and they want to know if they can get this ad, but they had 2 gift cards stacked and it doesn't say limited 1 per use. And I'm getting a phone call, but I'm like, well, let's give them the benefit of the doubt. Like, let's get them service. And I'm like, is that it? They're like, yeah, that's it. Like, can I start? The customer's on hold. And I'm like, oh my gosh. Like, that's where I found a lot of peace working in the job, is giving a lot of autonomy for our people to make mistakes. They just can't make policy changes or pay changes without consent.
Yeah. So I just wanted to spend a couple minutes on this because I know we've talked about the Rule of 7 a couple episodes ago, but because it's happened to us, I'm sure it's happened to a lot of people. Even if you're following it, be careful that counterparts aren't bypassing those people and that you're truly following the chain of command. Have meetings in place so that you have those times. Because if you don't have meetings in place, they don't know when they're going to meet with you next. I've been there before, but if you have the meetings in place, they can count on it. You don't reschedule them, it's sacred, right? It's a sacred rhythm that you're doing. Hey, every Wednesday we're meeting together.
Yeah.
This is the agenda that we're going over, and it's your time to bring up any challenges, any problems, any questions, but you have my undivided attention for an hour. They can look forward to that.
Yeah.
And there's power, because you want people happy, you want people performing their jobs. And I know that even though it costs you a lot of money to follow the rule of 7, you will become a better business owner because of it.
Ultimately, this whole principle has been implemented from the book Extreme Ownership from Jocko Willink. When we say we have 1 or 2 managers now who are leaving because they're a little burnt out, here is, an interesting take. We don't know how many people we wouldn't have if we weren't following it too.
Yeah.
Because when managers manage more than that 7 people, it is just shown that their effectiveness and their ability to lead and drive vision drops drastically. And I would rather lose the good manager or 2 in the fight of scaling a business, driving standards, principles, than try to save $300,000, I'm sure, for you at Green Mango, than to save the $300,000 and roll the dice on, let's see how a manager does managing 20, and we'll save $60,000 on his salary or something like that.
Yeah.
And so there's actually psychology behind why we implement things like this. And it's actually to improve the quality of life of not only the manager, but the people. And there was a study, or there was a video shown on social media, so it's true, is that the same chemicals that are released into your body when you are experiencing overwhelm and stress are the same chemicals that are being released as if you were being chased by a bear. And so when people are like, I don't want to go to work, I don't want to do this, or they're walking around and they're just a little tense on edge, their body is reacting as if they were in the same environment of like, hey, I'm in trouble.
Yeah.
And so these little principles that you can follow as business owners, as leaders, are very small ways to help people have a better quality of life and a better work experience.